Hello, welcome back to Global War 1939. We just finished off round two, so let's take a look at some of the action that has taken place. Now, before we get to round two, there's a couple things I did forget to mention in the last video. One was Japan's turn one purchase. I advocate highly to purchase two minor complexes, place them in mainland China. I would go with this territory where the city is and Peking. Those would offer the best places to produce new units, get them to the front lines, but they're far enough back that they shouldn't really be threatened a lot by the Chinese or Communist China. So those are probably the best locations, in my opinion. Getting the complexes does a couple things for you. It allows you to get units on the front lines as quick as possible. Yes, you could produce in your home islands, use your transports to ferry them over, no problem. However, the problem with this is that your newly purchased units are now a turn behind of where they should be. So getting the complexes avoids all that. It also frees up your transports to come and start taking these islands, which is critical to the Japanese economy, especially once they go to war with the United States. They tend to get locked into a naval conflict, and that is the most expensive type of warfare that you can engage in this game. So you need your economy as robust as possible. These islands are, and these two American islands are tied into a national objective, so you will get a bonus on top of the income that you get from here. And of course, you need your transports to do that. So then, even if you don't get these two complexes, the money you spend on this, you'll have to invest in transports anyways. Again, you'll be a turn behind of where you should be. So I would highly recommend this. And also don't forget on turn three, the Siam army base that you start with, you can upgrade that to a minor facility, allowing you to get 9 Japanese units and the Siam units for a total of 10 without worrying about ferrying them over. All right, and the second thing that I forgot to mention was the income for Russia and the United States. Mind you, the Americans do have a bit of a bonus. When the Germans attack France, the Americans will get a $5 bonus. When the Japanese attack FEC, they'll get a 25 bonus. So essentially, the Americans are starting at 30, not at 0. And Germany and Japan, in my games anyways, they typically attack those countries right away. So the Americans did have a fair, decent rolls, 2 turns in a row. So they're sitting at 64. For the Russians, however, they've been rolling quite poorly. Turn 1, they rolled a 12. Turn 2, they rolled only a 6. So they're sitting at 18. The only thing really helping the Russians right now is that the fact that they did take out Baltic states and East Poland for $3, plus they get a bonus of 5, so that's $8 that they really rely on. So that's helping the Russians out quite a bit. All right, now for turn 2, the Germans, all they really did was activate their final minor ally and purchase new units, which was a couple of Mark IVs, some more medium tanks, and a bunch of infantry artillery. The German infantry really got decimated in this game on turn 1. The Poles and the French, Yugoslavia, definitely took out a lot. The only real campaign the Germans did extremely well and better than most games. So above average performance up in Norway. They attacked Norway with 5 units plus a bombardment from a battleship and a cruiser. And they still have all 5 units. So good job there. But everywhere else on mainland Europe, the Germans took quite a few hits on their infantry corps. So that's going to be their focus, to rebuild that. Mind you, they also need armor before they engage the Russians. So right now in Romania, they have a stack of 10 infantry, 3 medium armor, 3 artillery, an SS infantry, 1 mech and 2 SS mechs. And then they have card 3, which is just on the west side of Germany. It'll be 2 more turns before they get into Romania. But a stack of 7 medium tanks and 3 mechanized. They'll be joined by a contingent of other units. These 5 tanks, bunch of infantry. They'll all form together and rendezvous in Romania before launching the assault on the southern Soviet Union. Yeah, so that's pretty much their plan. Just like in the past few games, the German plan hasn't really changed much. A couple tweaks here and there, but for the most part, it's still the same plan we've had since game 1. And it's worked very well. So now, with the inevitable assault up into Russia, right now they got 10 infantry, they got another 4 here, a couple stacks here. I like to go into Russia with minimum 25 infantry. I would like to get up to 40. 30 will work great. Minimum 25. Because typically, the Russians will set up an army in one of these 3 territories here. And of course, they'll have their defensive stack in Moscow. But usually, by the time you get to Moscow, your infantry corps is pretty much done. You might have 1 or 2 guys left, leaving it with a choice. Do you roll into Moscow with essentially just your artillery and armor and mechs, or do you wait 2, 3, 4 turns to refill your infantry? Because it's not just producing them, then you have to march them wherever your main army is, which buys time for the Russians to rebuild. So it should be interesting. Right now they got 10. I want to get up to minimum 25. As for the Italians, they did take out the rest of Greece. So they took out the islands on turn 1, turn 2. They captured Greece. The British did activate it. So if it didn't get attacked, eventually at some point the British will just branch out. Yeah, so, and the Germans typically have left Greece to Italy. One of the biggest reasons that the Horn of Africa usually falls on turn 2. So the Italians only get really 1 turn of income from these 2 territories. Then it falls to the British. There's very little you can do to stop this or prevent it, unless you're playing against an incompetent player. But this usually falls. So you need to find a way to replace this income. A great source of that would be take out all of Greece. You're actually +1 by taking out these 3 territories. And they're far enough away from the British. They're relatively safe. Once you're captured, you can utilize those units in another theater. And you really don't have to worry about them being captured until like ways down the road. And also, Greece is also tied into a national objective. So if you control any 3 of Cairo, Greece, Marseille, or Gibraltar, you'll get a $3 bonus for the Italians. So they're already halfway, they already got 2 territories, just need 1 more. The obvious choice would be Gibraltar. It's only garrisoned by 1 infantry and a fort. Cairo, they will be assaulting Cairo, but it's going to be turns down the road. So taking out Gibraltar gives them the bonus. It also prevents Allied ships from getting into the Mediterranean, giving the Italian fleet a little bit of a breather room. The Italians do rely on their navy to help in the capture of Cairo. But once, or if that does happen, the Italian fleet is then free to go into the Atlantic. And I say that every game, get the Italian fleet into the Atlantic to challenge the British and the Americans. It usually doesn't happen, or if it does, it's way too late. All right. Now, for the Russians right now are poised to attack Finland. In my opinion, you should do this One, it gives you some extra income, and the more money Russia gets, the better they are, more units they get on the map. It also prevents a northern assault from the Germans. Um, so basically, then the only real option the Germans have left is to go through the south. And because of this terrain, the Russians can mount a defense in Olarkursk, eastern Ukraine, while they supply Moscow with even more units. So the Russians usually attack here, then clean up the rest of Finland. Then that will overthrow the pro-German government in Finland. And if Germany does recapture it, they forever lose that ability to basically, for the Finnish to produce their own units. So it's a big win for the Russians. So the more likely that attack will happen this turn. And of course, what makes this battle easy for the Russians is the utilization of their Air Force. Definitely get all their planes in there. Do as much damage as you possibly can. Certainly this AA gun from Finns will move in to hopefully make the Russians think twice about using their Air Force, but the Air Force is vital in that attack. For the Canada, UK, America in the Atlantic, after turn one, the Germans had 3 subs here, doing some convoying. The Canadians and both the UK produced a transport in Sea Zone 21. Knowing that these subs were in range, their hopes were that they would send all 3 subs up and then move their British Navy here, essentially trapping them because they wouldn't be able to escape out of the Atlantic before this Navy hits them. So they kind of set up a bait. However, the Germans took it but didn't. They only sent 1 sub up. The other 2 subs went further south to do this convoy box instead of that one. So the subs days are numbered. So it wasn't a good trade-off. The British were really hoping to get all 3 subs, but so Canada's been stuck in, the Canadian troops have been stuck in Canada. So they need to get rid of the sub and start producing more transports. Canada didn't spend any money last turn, so they just saved. So they'll be able to produce quite a number of transports this turn compared to the last. Yeah, so Canada's got $19 right now. And for the Americans, they didn't really, well, they really can't do much. They're not in the war yet. So they produced a couple more light armor, a couple of artillery, and a battleship to complement the aircraft carrier that they produced on turn 1. And they placed that in Sea Zone 133 in the Pacific. And like most of the American capital ships and heavy hitters will probably end up in the Pacific, and in the Atlantic they'll produce some warships, but it'll be mostly transports. The Americans are going to rely on the British to offer their escort duties, defensive. They'll have the stronger ships to contend with the Germans, and then once the Americans and the British see the Italians come out, then they'll have to start producing here. But earlier on in the war, the Americans should produce their more costly, more destructive sea vessels in the Pacific to challenge the Japanese. That's my opinion, anyways. So as for FEC, they went ahead and reinforced Burma yet again. They really want to keep this road open. It helps the Chinese out greatly. It does give China some extra money. It also allows them to produce artillery, and it also allows the Americans to lend lease a light armor to China. It does cost the Americans more money to give a tank to China than produce their own, but the more firepower you can get into China, because really their biggest offensive weapon is one fighter. They do got 3 cavalry, which attack on a 3 instead of a 2. But to get some armor into China will help them out greatly. China's good at a defensive war, not so much as an offensive weapon. FEC also activated Iran, so they're just waiting out now. Iraq does start the game as a pro-Axis. However, by the time you get to turn 7, if the Italians hasn't activated this yet, then the Iraqi government overthrows and becomes pro-Allied, which then the British can easily walk in, claim 2 free infantry, and then get a bonus from the Middle Eastern territories. But we'll see if Cairo holds out that long. Cairo is the gateway into the Middle East, and it's also the gateway for the rest of Africa. If you control Cairo, you pretty much control this entire continent. So we'll see how all this plays out. Australia, they went ahead and took out Carolina Islands. They didn't produce any Navy this turn. They, on their second, or their transport that they produced on the first turn, they moved up some infantry. So they're going to go after this territory here if the Japanese don't challenge them. The Japanese are poised with a couple sea vessels here, a couple destroyers, cruisers. We got some subs, some more destroyers up there. So we'll see how all this plays out. As the main Japanese fleet is kind of running after the FEC fleet here. The main Japanese fleet is consisting of 2 battleships, 2 carriers, 4 cruisers, 3 destroyers, and 2 escort carriers. And the Japanese did go ahead and construct another carrier with just regular fighters, as they opted to put the bulk of their money into land-based units. So they did reinforce. They got some more infantry, some more artillery, mechanized infantry. So they'll spring out quite quickly here, recapturing these 3 territories that China and Communist China have taken, and start taking territory off China itself. Japan also did take out these 2 territories here. Quite easily, they took out this one using bombardments. So by the time their infantry got to land, there was no real resistance left for them. So basically just a couple more territories here left. Wait for the Americans, attack these 2 territories, and activate their bonus. So that's the plan for those islands. And then, of course, a major operation that the Japanese do need to go into is this territory, Burma. It does weaken the Allied forces at war with Japan quite a bit. And then for this air transport that we start with for the last couple turns, what they've done is flown down here, picked up the guy, and then moved him to Hong Kong. Of course, this is all in the non-combat turn. So that's what he's been doing the last couple turns. Now, he'll more likely fly back to the home islands and just ferry guys one at a time over any excess infantry or land-based units that we can't produce in these production facilities, because we are limited to only producing 3 each. All right, and I think that is everything for this turn. Total income-wise, total altogether, the Allies are outproducing the Axis. The Axis are gaining money quite heavily in the last couple turns. So once, like Germany, for example, once they get all their territories, they're usually sitting around $60, and then their bonuses will usually bump them up to $75 before they go into Russia. And then Japan, their goal is to get to 80 and then fight the Americans. All right, well, thank you for watching, and have yourself a great day.